I truly resent the notion that anybody at this board is trying to hide anything from anybody. I don't think that's ever been the case, and I don't think it is now. I think also we need to take a look at the context for the portfolio plan, which this is a big part of. The portfolio plan was started by a group called City Fund, and City Fund put in $200 million into a system that says that they want to intervene, close schools, district schools, and reopen them as charter schools. This is currently going on in Atlanta, Memphis, New Orleans. It's currently going on in Chicago, which I happened to be in this last weekend. And what has happened is that the use of student growth has been taken to be a hammer to say that we need to close every school that's not making student growth and reopen it as a charter school, which I think is an interesting thing for the charter schools in this district, at least their representatives, to encourage us to do when every time we have a charter renewal and a charter school is not making growth, it says it shouldn't use that category. And we had just a couple in the last time. When you spend $200 million, you get to have what you want in 40 cities in 10 years. And that's what's happened. In 40 cities in 10 years, they've decided to use the hammer, not the valuable information you might get from student growth, but the hammer to say if your school is not growing by a sufficient number, we're closing your school. And this is going on. This is going on in Atlanta. It's going on in parts of New Jersey. It's going on in Denver. It's going on in Oakland. It's going on in a great variety of places. And that was my concern. It wasn't a concern about should you know whether there's growth or not. Of course you can, actually you can figure it out now. You can look at your third grade scores and then look at your fourth grade scores. They're the same kids, and you can decide growth on your own. You don't need us to do it for you. But that was my concern in saying that I was very worried about all of this. But my biggest concern really was public humiliation. We have lots and lots and lots of research that shows that when you begin to call schools bad schools, and don't misunderstand me, anytime you call a school a number 1 in a 1 to 5 star program or red when everybody else is blue or green, you're calling schools bad schools. When you do that, what you are saying to people is get your kids out of there as fast as humanly possible. I don't think there are bad schools. I really don't. I don't know of a single school that I have visited, and I've visited quite a few so far, where even where achievement is not what we hope it would be, where the teachers aren't working hard, where the classified teaching assistants aren't working hard, where the parents aren't committed, and where the kids aren't attending school. So it's not a bad school. It's not being successful in our goals, but it's not a bad school. So my biggest goal in bringing this motion forward was to get rid of any form of ranking. I can tell you, after having spent a lot of my lifetime teaching in low-income districts, that public humiliation is not a motivator. It does not make people try harder. In fact, it makes people feel like I want to get out of here, I give up, I quit, and that's the same thing it does to students and families, and you don't want to do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I'm worried about is this notion that we do know that this is a national program. Now, I'm not saying that the people who did it here were a part of that national program. I wasn't here. I don't know. I don't even care. But the proposal did come out to be a portfolio plan. Whether that was the intent or not is unimportant to me. But I'm not interested in a portfolio plan because if you take a look where they have closed schools, and I'll just use Chicago because my sister-in-law worked for 42 years there, and I've just had this discussion with her the other day. What happens is when the charter school came in after the district school was closed, it didn't keep all the kids that were going to that school. Some of those kids were counseled out after they were accepted. And now where do they go? Their local district school is closed. I'm not interested in seeing that happen. I am not interested in providing an opportunity for the $200 million fund to try to make this district do what it is doing in other districts. which is to say that an underfunded district, I mean, can you imagine the audacity of this? We say that it takes $30,000 to $40,000 to educate a rich kid, but only $16,000 to educate a poor kid. That's insane. It should be the reverse. We should be spending $30,000 on poor kids and $16,000 on rich kids. But that's not how this works. We have an underfunded system in which we are not ever going to achieve what we want to achieve. That's my personal opinion. Because we do not have enough resources to deal with the social emotional issues, with trauma. We don't have enough resources to have the class size be appropriately small for the students who need extra time with a teacher. We don't have the resources to make sure that the children have after-school activities and field trips and sports and music and art, which engage students that sometimes are not easily engaged in education. So if we don't have enough money, then it is my view to do what SPF did, whether it is well-intentioned, and I assume good intentions. But my belief is that what we have is an outcome that leads to this notion of value-added growth. And value-added growth is not a measurement technique, and let me tell you why. If your students are reading at the 5th percentile and they go to the 10th percentile, they have 100% improvement. That's what you're going to write down as student growth, 100%. But if you went from 48 to 52%, which means now more than half of your students are meeting or exceeding, that's a very small percentage. You have almost no growth. That's one of the problems with growth. Do I want to keep people from seeing it? No, I don't care. You can see anything you want to see. But it isn't a statistic that is very useful, because when you use a percentage of a number, you get a very distorted notion. Secondly, I think that it is incredibly ironic, and I have to say this quite seriously, that the same people who have resisted charter school transparency are now the ones demanding us to be transparent. I'm sorry, I have to say that. I would love to see the budget of every charter school. I would love to have them disaggregate the student enrollment and tell us what the students at each of one of their schools is doing, not only by race and ethnicity, but by income level. I would love to see them show us the list of students that are counseled out every year and where they went and why they were counseled out. I would love to get a lot of transparency, but that's not this motion. That's for another day. But I do want to say to you that I think it is important that we not intentionally or unintentionally put ourselves on a path where we start talking about value added, because here's where it's been used other places in the country. Growth and value added. Well, let's pay teachers more if their students do better on the SBAC than the students that don't. Well, I spent my entire teaching career accepting into my class all of the students who are reading below grade level. All right, why would I do that if now it's going to cost me money? I'd have to say, well, don't do that anymore. It's going to cost me money. In addition to which, here's the worst part of value added, is that once you begin to change the salary and recognition of teachers based on how their students do on tests, teachers stop collaborating with each other. They stop giving each other their materials. They stop sending to each other the notion that, oh, I had a great lesson. It worked really well in my history class. Here it is. Well, I don't want your kids to do better, because if your kids do better, I might lose salary and you might get salary. So people stop collaborating. In Indiana, it was used heavily. It's been withdrawn because they saw that teachers were stopping to collaborate with each other. So there are dangers in data. Data is not neutral. Data is not neutral when there are people who are willing to spend $200 million. I'm sorry. When there are people willing to spend $200 million, and where did it come from? It came from the Walmart Foundation. It came from the Dell Foundation. It came from, well, I have it here, but I don't remember where it is. It came from a variety of places, none of which were educational foundations, not a single one of them. They were all private sector groups who support heavily the notion that public education needs to be gotten rid of in favor of privatizing the system. I don't believe that's how SPF came here. I do not believe that for a minute. I do not impugn the motives of my colleagues. I've worked too long with many of you. I've known too many of you too long. But I do believe there are unintended consequences, which has led to my motion. And the unintended consequences are, sure, if you want to put growth on the data, fine. If you want to add, as we did with the notion that we want to add all kinds of other things, fine. I am not, however, interested in producing a page on your website where you can see the highest growth to the lowest growth, because I don't think growth is a very useful statistic, and if you want to make that comparison, feel free to do your school and compare it to every other school you want to. I'm sure that the folks promoting charters will do that on their own. I did have a second amendment here, which is in the second resolve, and that is that it adds the following. Well, I'll just read it, including the amendment. That the district further the goal of giving students, parents, school employees, and the general public more information about district schools by including important and wide-ranging types of data on its website in an accessible fashion, including but not limited to data from the California Department of Education's California School Dashboard, socioeconomic data, reclassification rates, student growth data, and school environmental indicators. So yes, we can put that on there, but I have to tell you that in agreeing to that, it's not because I agreed to it because didn't include it in the first place because I don't want someone to know these things. It's because how it has been used, we don't have to worry about how it might have been used. We can actually look at the districts where this has been used as a hammer to close district schools and turn them over to charters, and I'm not personally interested in having that be the goal of the outcome. Data is useful for some things. It can be abused in so many ways. And I have no problem including growth, but it would be nice to remind people that growth is a percentage, and percentages are pretty weird because people who have pretty low scores can, by just doubling their scores, going from 2 to 4%, can show 100% growth. Oh my God, wow, that should be the #1 school in the state, right? It's got 100% growth. So that's why my motion says what it says. I hope that you'll understand that I mean no disrespect to those of you who spent time on this, but I do believe that we do not need to put ourselves in a position of encouraging that fund, the city fund, to come here and then go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. And step 4, because these folks think very long range, step 4 is let's close your damn low-performing schools and let's open them up as charter schools. That's not where I want to go. I don't think any of you do either, and so I ask for your support.